Hey guys, my name's Lonnie. I'm a real alcoholic. My sobriety date is April 2nd, 2019. My sponsor is Mark W. My home group is Glum Nuts. And I sponsor a few people. Let's get right into it. My my alcoholic drinking began at 11 years old. I think I'm one of those people that from the very first try, I was hooked. I knew I was alcoholic. I was 11, maybe 12 years old. My parents left me at home. They were going out to dinner and dancing or something. And man, I got into the liquor cabinet. We had a real nice bar with just about everything you could imagine. So I don't remember which particular brand of whiskey it was, but I found one that I liked and I proceeded to get drunk. And I can tell you, that feeling of that feeling of have, have arrived, that feeling we chase for the rest of our lives, that electrifying shiver through your body. I felt it, and I felt it good. So naturally, when they came home, they found me passed out. I was in between the couch and the wall, and I was sick, and I was trying to hide, and I puked all over myself. And so I remember mom waking me up, and she drug me out between the couch and the wall, and I just told her I was sick. I went and got cleaned up, and I went to bed. Well, my drinking continued. I would sneak drinks every chance I got. I would refill the bottle with some water and eventually got caught and got a real serious ass whipping for that. But I was hooked, man. That was it. I had found the answer. I had found that one thing that completed me. And so my drinking continued off and on every chance I could get it, every chance I could sneak it. And one of the when I was 13, I guess one of the only times where I could say I actually enjoyed my drinking was I was 13. I was working at this horse ranch, and it was common. We had three or four other guys my age that were working there. We had some older guys in their late 20s and early 30s, and it was party central, man. It was an everyday drink fest. We'd smoke weed at about 5:30 in the morning. Take the horses out for gallops that were pretty well trained, and man, just that buzz and that feeling of being on the racetrack early in the morning, watching the sun come up. Once again, I had found my completeness. I was whole. I was here. That was the thing. And by 11 o'clock, man, we were finished riding all our horses, and we did the everyday maintenance stuff after that. And then it was time to drink, man. The long neck Budweisers came out, and we drank. Well, one weekend, my bosses went out. They went to Kentucky to go to this big horse sale, and they left us alone for the whole weekend at the ranch. And so naturally, the older guys there, they just threw a party that was out of this world, man. I had never seen so much alcohol, so much drugs, so many good-looking women. It just blew my mind. And early on into that thing, I saw this woman in some white shorts, man, and I love me some white shorts, right? So I reached out and I put my hand in her pocket, and she slapped the shit out of me. And one of the older guys came over. He said, "Lonnie, man, you're getting a little out of control. You can't be touching the women like that. You need to go sit down, man." So I went sit down in the rocking chair, and I'm rocking and I'm looking out the window. Next thing you know, I see the mule hauling ass through the pasture with my bicycle, dragging my fucking bicycle through the pasture. So I was like, what the fuck? So I ran out there. I caught the mule. The handlebars had got caught up in the halter some kind of way. And so I got the bike all fixed up and parked it. And well, the party continued, man. We kept doing our thing, and finally they sent me home. It was like Lonnie, you had enough. You gotta go. I don't know if I was talking shit. I don't know if I was still touching women. I don't know what the hell was happening. But they said, Lonnie, you gotta go. So I jumped on that bicycle and I went down that long gravel road, and I ended up in the ditch, man. It was my first drinking and driving accident. I crashed in that ditch, and I was paralyzed. I couldn't move, man. I was still awake, but I stayed there. I don't know how long, hours, and then eventually people started leaving the party, and I could hear them passing me up, and I would try to raise my hand to get their attention, and nobody was stopping, and eventually a couple of the hands saw me in the ditch, and they brought me to this old lady's house and parked me under the tree in her front yard. Well, she found me the next morning, early the next morning, and eventually I got home. But that should have been an awakening for me. That should have been a, a precursor to my whole drinking career. Man, every time I drank, and for the rest of my life, I always had some woman that was trying to fight with me. Some jackass was trying to steal something from me. I wrecked every fucking thing I drove, and the only people that gave a shit were old ladies. And and that's how it was the rest of my drinking career. I could skip the next 20 some odd years of my life because that's how it was. I was always in a fight with somebody. I was always uh, trying to get back either something I sold or something somebody took from me. Um, the wrecks upon wrecks upon wrecks. Oh my God, it was unbelievable. And but of course, being a true alcoholic, we laughed about it the next day, and we were ready to do it again. So we did. I continued partying with those people till I was about 15 years old. I ended up in a treatment center it was kind of a bullshit attempted suicide. I was all drunk one night and slipped myself. But, while I was in that treatment center, one of my best friends passed away. He was in a drinking and driving accident, a car full of about five people, I think, and all of them were killed. Some high school friends, and that wasn't the first, and it wasn't the only high school tragedy that we had like that. But they let me out of that treatment center at almost 15 years old, and I went to the funeral, and me and this guy's brother, we sat on the tailgate of the truck, we drank Boone's Farm, and we smoked weed. There was no thought, there was no scaring us as alcoholics. It just really was not going to happen. Um, the fact that they were drinking, that never even crossed our mind. That had they been sober, that might not have happened. For us, it was just one of those things that just went with the territory. And we just never put two and two together. I was not convinced. I didn't want to be convinced. At 15 years old, it was everybody else's fault. Everybody else had a problem. Blah 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 blah. Well, I get out of the treatment center, and the very next Christmas, I was at this parade and fell in love with a young lady. So 2 years later, I'm 16 years old. I'm about to turn 17, and I'm wanting to marry this girl. And I'm thinking, you know what? I had already quit school. I got my GED. I was working at a paint and body shop, which once again, hanging out with older people. There's the drugs and the alcohol were everywhere. But I was thinking I really wanted to marry this woman, so I was going to join the military. I couldn't think. I knew I wasn't making enough at the body shop to support a wife. So I was going to join the military, and the military would take care of us, and they would give us government housing, and we would get to shop at the PX, and they would pay my salary, a good salary. So I was like, that's what I'm going to do. So at 16 years old, I started talking to the recruiters. The little woman was kind of with it at first, right? And so I took all my tests, everything went well. And on my 17th birthday, they were signing me up. I was in New Orleans at the MEP station. I was raising my hand September 5th, 1985. And to be honest, guys, that was really one of the best moves I ever made as an alcoholic. I went to basic training. Basic training, I stayed sober almost the whole time. We had one little break, but at about Christmas time, and I really got fucked up around Christmas. But I didn't get in much trouble, man. I came home, I spent time with the little woman, and then I went back to basic training like I was supposed to graduate. And man, I graduated good. I was like top 10 in that whole battalion. Walked across the stage with honors. I had expert in everything they tried to hit us with. I had qualified expert in. I had certificates of recommendation. I mean, it was Joe Soldier time, bro. I was hooked. And when I graduated, when I walked across that stage, something hit me really hard. I looked across at the audience and I saw everybody there with their families and their brothers and their moms and cousins, and people came to visit, and there I was standing there and I was all alone. Nobody had come to my graduation. The little woman I wanted to marry, she wasn't there. And once again, with all these accomplishments, I was incomplete. I just was not fulfilled. And I got severely smashed for that whole weekend, man. That whole weekend I went with a buddy and his girlfriend, his fiance, and we hit the town and we did all kind of crazy stuff together. But but I wasn't complete unless I was drinking. And that's just the way it was. Being all alone in this world was a tremendous, tremendous heartache for me. So after basic training, I got into AIT. AIT was the same shit, man. I excelled at everything. They had recruited me into being a diesel mechanic, um, promising me that if I did well, I could jump out of planes. But after I graduated AIT, I found out that the Army did not need mechanics jumping out of planes with toolboxes. So I was pretty pissed off about that. They told me I would have to finish my contract, which I only had a 2-year contract, but they told me if I wanted to re enlist for something else, I could. So I was like, fuck, all right, well, I'll be a mechanic. Then the next thing that hit me, I thought I was going to be stationed stateside, of course. Well, they want to send me to Germany. And my little girlfriend is not about to go to Germany. It was hard enough to convince her to leave her hometown in the future, but she was not about to go overseas and go to Germany. She let me know she was pregnant, and she told me that the baby was not mine. I remember that day like it was yesterday. In that phone booth in Fort Knox, Kentucky, I had a mental breakdown and I broke down. I just lost my shit. Well, eventually I recovered. They shipped me off. I got to St. Louis, and I was supposed to switch flights in St. Louis, and we had like a 12-hour layover or some kind of shit like that. Well, I hooked up with this other army guy, and we hit the town. We found a couple ladies, and I was gone for like 4 days, man. We were in the hotel room just really getting it on. And after that 4 days, After that 4 days, I show up at the airport. They're calling my name over the intercom. Uh, Private Stout, Private Stout, Private Stout. Report to such and such recruiting station. So, so I end up at this station where I needed to be, and man, this drill sergeant or whoever he was just really upset. Made me do some push-ups. Was like, "Where you been?" I said, "I was partying, Sarge." He was like, "Don't you know you've been AWOL?" I said, "I'm not AWOL." I said, "I got some time coming to me. You know, like I had some military leave time." I said, "I just took my time that was coming to me." He said, "You can't just take time like that whenever you want." He said, "I got a good mind not to send you to Germany." I was like, "Good. I don't want to go to fucking Germany anyway." And that was my attitude, man. I was just completely discouraged. I had bottomed out. I'm stuck in the military. And the only thing that made me feel good was the wine and the women. And that was it. And I spent the next, I don't know, few months. Um, that's all I did in Germany was I did my job. If I showed up, I would show up at 10 o'clock in the morning and claim that I was doing more work than everybody did before noon. I would do stupid shit like go out at night and fall asleep on the trains, wake up in some strange city, not knowing where I'm at. Take me a whole day to get back to the base. Funny I didn't get any more AWOL charges, but I never could make rank, man. I was a sloppy dude. All I did was just drink. Now, the base I was on, we had a lot of field maneuvers, probably the most of all people in Germany. And my master sergeant sat me down one time. He told me, he said, Lonnie, he said, if I could keep you in the woods 365 days out the year, you'd be the best soldier I got. He said, you get into town. He said, you get back in garrison. We get back and I don't know what happens to you. He says, what the fuck's going on? I said, I'm just partying, Sarge. And to me, that's all it was, man. I was just partying. I did not know that I was using alcohol. I did not know that I was partying to feel complete. All I knew was that was a good time, and I was happy doing that, and that's what I did. So they decide they're going to send me to AA, right? The captain, he says, after my, I don't know, second time I was lost some rank, he said, I'm going to send you to these meetings. So I started going to these meetings, man, and I'm pretty sure it was Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. And guess what? They told me I could leave. I was like, what? I went to a couple meetings, man. I was asking questions, and I was pretty cocky. I was running my mouth about, this, that, and the other. And they says, you know what? They said, you don't have to be here. I'm thinking I had to be there, like I would get in trouble if I wasn't. They said, you don't have to be here, man. You can leave. I said, well, good. I'm out of here. So after that, that was my last contact with Alcoholics Anonymous for about a year or so. I didn't fulfill my contract with the military. Our platoon was so bad when it came to drinking and partying that the captain decided he was going to make an example out of somebody. And since I was a short timer, he gave me a general discharge and let me out 1 month early. And he wanted to show the rest of the platoon that he wasn't playing around, that they had to get their shit together. And I was pretty upset about that because I realized my drinking had got, it was really out of control. I was peeing on myself in broad daylight because I was so sick from the night before. I couldn't control my bladder. And by 19 years old, it had gotten to that point. That's how much I had drank. I was already starting to deteriorate my body. And so I'd kind of slacked off a little bit. I got back in shape. Special forces came around. They were looking at me, and I was really gonna re-enlist, man. I was gonna keep my shit together. I was gonna re-enlist. I was gonna get into special forces and try that route. Um, but the captain had other ideas, man. He says, he says you can always re-enlist in the future if you want. He said, but I have to do something with you guys in that maintenance platoon. And he did. He got rid of me. He made an example. And so I get home with my head hung down, man. I told a lie. I told everybody I had some leave time coming to me, so I got out a month early and this, that, and the other. They bought that story. And about 6 months later, my dumb ass was getting married. Not to the one I joined the military for. An old friend that I kind of grew up with. And once again, I was going to complete myself with something outside of myself. And during that marriage, that was crazy. We were both drinking like fish. Every weekend was a damn drug fest. It was either the cocaine and the ecstasy. That was our drugs of choice back then. We weren't getting along. And I had an uncle that was involved with AA. And he told me, he said, Lonnie, man, he said, look, and I was complaining to him about my marriage and all of this stuff. He says, Lonnie, look. He said, man, he said, I go to these meetings. He said, you want to come with me? I said, what kind of meetings? He said, well, he said, we go and we talk about how we don't drink. I said, why the hell you want to do that? I was no way interested in going to these meetings, but he talked me into it, and I'm like, okay. So I started going to those meetings, man, and I noticed a little something. I noticed these people were claiming they were all sober, and they had been sober for a long time, and they were happy. They were telling jokes, and they were cutting up in the meetings, and they had vehicles that weren't broke down. They had jobs. They had businesses. They had families. And I was like, fuck, this is pretty cool, man. Maybe I am alcoholic. Maybe I should quit all this drinking. So I ended up going to treatment. And that big book you see right there, man, there's a long story behind that big book. I got that big book when I went to treatment. It was probably 1987 when I went to treatment. And I did my 28 days. I got out. I had a little hope. And after a month or two, man, I'm sitting around. I remember telling myself, nobody's going to tell me I can't have a glass of wine with my wife. And that was my first relapse in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was going to have a glass of wine with my wife. Well, 6 months later, she done left me. I'm shooting up the house, all fucking crazy. And so I ended up sobering up a little bit. I moved to Arkansas. I stayed sober a little while in Arkansas. I was working a big ranch over there. Relapsed. Got sober again. Started traveling. I hitchhiked all the way to Billings, Montana. Got to Billings. Got a job on the horse racetrack there. Started going to AA for real, man. Started going to AA every single day. Looking for sponsors. Trying to get sober, man. I could get 2 months. I could get a couple weeks. I think the longest I went was like 6 months. And so I traveled with the racehorses for a while. I went to Nebraska for a little while. Worked there on doing some farm and ranch stuff. Stayed once again, got sponsors, went to meetings, tried to stay sober, and I just couldn't get it. Back to Billings, Montana, and I heard this speaker tape, man. It was from Clancy Emerson. At that time, we had cassette tapes, but I had this tape of Clancy, and I was like, man, I'm over 2 years in AA. This is getting close to 91. And I just can't get sober, man. It was, I couldn't understand what was going wrong. I would read what my sponsors told me to read. I did attempt a 4-step, and I did my 5th step with some unknown priest, and it was. I thought I was doing everything that I was supposed to be doing. I was going to meetings, I was sharing, I was listening, I was, but for some reason I wasn't getting it. And I was so distraught. I said, man, I'm going to call this guy in California and see if he'll be my sponsor, because somebody got to sober me up. So I made a phone call, and I didn't talk to Clancy, but I did talk with somebody there, and they said, yeah, man, just come on down. If he can't sponsor you, we'll find somebody to sponsor you. So I was like, all right. And I'm still drinking. I threw all my stuff in my truck. I started selling shit so I could afford the gas and the alcohol to get to California. And I started driving. Well, lo and behold, I'm passing through Vegas. Now that was a shock. I'm like, I didn't even know I was going to pass through Vegas. So I'm passing through Vegas and my truck breaks down. I had sobered up by now. I'd unsold all my shit out of my truck. Took me a couple of days to detox in my truck on the streets of Vegas. But eventually I got on the phone and I found an Alano club. And that club stayed open 24/7. So I contacted somebody there. Somebody helped me get my truck to the parking lot at the club. And I was sleeping in my truck. And the girl that was working the little counter where they serve chips and coffee and hot dogs, stuff like that,